Okay, guys, I'm back with more Notebook of Doom. I want to finish it this week so you guys can finish listening and taking AR tests. This is chapter 24, the ultimate test, day 1. The 4 unbreakables met by the flagpole before school. Don't worry, Mauricia, said Joy. When you get sent back to kindergarten, I'll still be your friend. Thanks, said Mauricia. I know you'll do great. Nobody can jump rope like you can. True, Joy agreed. And Ron's memorized every page in the dictionary, said Dee Dee. Ron smiled. Joy's a good speller, too, he pointed out. You always get 100% on your spelling tests. True, Joy agreed. And one of Dee Dee's legs is shorter than the other, said Mauricia. Dee Dee smiled. Just lucky, I guess, she admitted. They locked thumbs and pinkies and shouted, Unbreakable! Mauricia glanced up at the cloud of doom, then followed her friends into the school building. I hope everybody's ready, Mrs. Jules greeted her class. You just need to remember everything you've ever learned in your whole life. The children looked nervously around. The test would last 3 days. Each day would have several minor tests and one major event. On day 1, the major event was a spelling bee. You mean we have to spell the words out loud? Asked Joy. That's how a spelling bee works, said Mrs. Jules. Joy did a lot better when she could write the words. She was a master of fudge squiggles. If she didn't know the letters, she made a fudge squiggle that could have been any number of letters. Mrs. Jules always gave her the benefit of the doubt. All the children stood along the wall as they waited for their turns. If they missed a word, they would have to sit down. Mac couldn't spell curious. Leslie missed squawked. Jason went out on confidential. Dilly-dally, said Mrs. Jules. Dilly-dally, Todd repeated. He got every letter right, but left out the hyphen. It's not even a letter, he protested when Mrs. Jules told him to sit down. Jenny missed skateboard. Joy was next. Helicopter, said Mrs. Jules. Helicopter, Joy repeated. H-E-L. She was stuck. She didn't know if there was 1 or 2 L's, and she didn't know if the letter after that was an E or an I. If she could have written it, she could have made the perfect fudge squiggles to cover all the possibilities. She returned to her seat. Dee Dee was eliminated on eliminated. A short leg didn't help with spelling. After a while, only 3 students remained, John, Ron, and Mauricia. Spectacle, said Mrs. Jules. Spectacle, John repeated. S-K-E-P-T-I-C-A-L. Only Ron and Mauricia remained. Orchestra, said Mrs. Jules. Murmurs could be heard around the room. Nobody thought Ron could do it. Orchestra, Ron repeated, and then spelled it perfectly. Vacuum, said Mrs. Jules. Mauricia wasn't sure if there were 2 C's and 1 U or 2 U's and 1 C, but she guessed right. Mrs. Jules closed her dictionary. Well, that's all the dictionary words, she announced. I guess I'll have to use words that aren't in the dictionary. It was Ron's turn. Thruple-dub, said Mrs. Jules. Ron had memorized the entire dictionary. How was he supposed to spell undictionary words? May I have the definition, he asked. It's when you count to 3 and fall asleep in the middle, said Mrs. Jules. Oh, that's easy, Ron said, then correctly spelled the non-word. Fudge squiggle, said Mrs. Jules. Mauricia spelled it perfectly. She even included the hyphen, having learned from Todd's earlier mistake. Whumph, said Mrs. Jules. Again, Ron asked for the definition. It's the sound made by a jump rope as it brushes against the ground, explained Mrs. Jules. Ron gave it his best shot. W-H-U-M-P-H. I'm sorry, Ron, said Mrs. Jules. There are 2 M's in whumph. I win, Mauricia exclaimed. The class cheered. Ron felt cheated. If it's a made-up word, who gets to decide the number of M's? Mauricia's smile was big and bright. Ron was not smiling. Chapter 25, Jump Rope Arithmetic. On day 2, the major event was jump rope arithmetic. It is just what you'd expect from the name. The children had to answer arithmetic problems while jumping rope. They earned 1 point for each jump of a rope. They could choose either to use 1 rope or 2 at a time. 2 ropes were harder, but the points added up more quickly. If they answered a problem wrong or tripped over a rope, they were done. Joy, of course, chose 2 ropes. This was her special talent, like Joe's upside-down jingle bells or Dana's funny faces. 4 plus 7, asked Mrs. Jules. Whumph. 11, replied Joy. Whumph. 2 points, and she'd only had to answer one question. Whoomp, 3 times 9. Whoomp, 20. Whoomp, 7. Whoomp. She continued with ease, skipping lightly over the ropes while rattling off answers. Lewis and Miss Nogard turned the ropes for her. Miss Nogard was everyone's favorite substitute teacher, especially Lewis's. By the time Joy reached 65 points, nearly everybody else in her class had finished jumping. Ron had earned 23 points. Dee Dee only got to 6. Jumping rope wasn't easy for her since one leg was shorter than the other. DJ had the highest score so far with 84 points. In the history of the ultimate test, nobody had ever broken 100. Whoomp, whoomp. 12 divided by 4, asked Mrs. Jules. Whoomp, whoomp. 3, said Joy. Whoomp, whoomp. A circle of children had formed around her. They cheered each correct answer. Go, Joy, go, shouted Mac. When she reached 80 points, even Mrs. Jules started to get excited. 38, whoomp, plus 14, whoomp, 52, whoomp, whoomp. She now was tied with DJ. 100 and whoomp, 43, whoomp, divided by whoomp, 11, 13. Everyone took up Mac's call. Go, Joy, go, go, Joy, go, they chanted. Lewis's and Miss Nogard's arms were getting tired, but they continued to twirl the ropes. They knew they were a part of history. Joy was now up to 99. Joy, go, Joy, go, go, Joy, go. Whoomp, whoomp, 29 times 4, shouted Mrs. Jules. Whoomp, whoomp, 116, Joy easily answered. Everyone whooped and hollered. That's a new world record, exclaimed Dee Dee. Whoomp, whoomp, 6 times 7. Whoop. Joy lay sprawled across the blacktop. 6s and 7s always tripped her up. Still, she had broken 100 and set a new world record. Her classmates rushed up to her. You're the best ever, said Kathy. True, Joy agreed. There was one jumper left. Whoomp, 16 minus 11. Whoomp, 5, said Marisha. Marisha used only one rope. Miss Mush and Mr. Pepperadder turned it for her. She jumped with both feet at the same time and held her breath every time she jumped. Whoomp, 9 times 8. Whoomp, 72. Whoomp. Joy continued to lie on the blacktop as she listened to the slow whomping. She imagined the solid gold trophy with her name on it. Her picture would be in newspapers all around the world. She'd go on TV where famous people would ask her questions about jumping rope and arithmetic. Maybe they'd put her in a movie. When she came out of her daydream, she was surprised to hear the jump rope still whomping. 0 times 1,000. Whoop, 0. Joy sat up to see that a circle of kids had surrounded Marisha. They cheered every one of her answers. Whoop. She headed over and poked Todd in the back of his neck. What's her score so far? 66, he told her. Joy wasn't too worried. She was sure her best friend would whoop rap at any moment. She didn't start to worry until Marisha reached 80. Whoop, 16 times 17. Whoop, 272. Whoop. Well, sure, Joy thought bitterly. 16s and 17s were a lot easier than 6s and 7s. In the end, Marisha wrapped on an easy one, 2 plus 3. She was probably just tired. She had been jumping for almost an hour and had earned 211 points. Joy didn't see her fall. She had quit watching long before.